Welcome once again to the South Side Kōrero. We have an amazing episode. I get to share another amazing guest. Well, honestly, getting better and better by the minute. So, Guy Pigden, my beautiful mentor, as well as wrestling fanatic as well. We had an amazing episode as we go through the intricacies of digital media. We went through your amazing journey as well, that 10,000 hour being the buzzword, the keyword within that conversation. And it's just, I don't know, today's episode seems really special. And your thoughts about that episode?
Well, thank you for having me, Vinny. Greatly appreciate the time that we've shared together. A lot of fascinating conversations around what it takes to be a creative, and I hope that everyone enjoys it.
And same as I. Kia ora. So first things first, I want to. So for our beautiful viewers, this is Guy Pigden. He is my MIT tutor for digital technologies, class of digital media level 4. Is that right?
That's right.
And I want to say congratulations firsthand for having a 80 to 90% class pass rate.
That's right. Yeah, very proud of that. It was one of my better ones.
Yeah, I know, right? We only had one person, right, that didn't pass.
Yes, sadly, one person didn't choose to finish the course, but I'm always super. That was my sort of goal at the beginning of the course, is to try and get 100% pass rate. I was not successful, but we came pretty close, and I'm still pretty happy with that result.
Honestly, you always tell us that, you know, even though you leave, that the door's still open for us to learn.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, that course, that digital media course, should be the beginning of your journey, not the end of it.
No, absolutely.
And it should be the sort of, I hope, the gateway to learning what you sort of want to specialize in when it comes to digital media, because there's many different facets of digital media. It's constantly changing and evolving, and there's a lot of opportunity in that space. And you know, but you have to be willing to go, okay, you know, this is the part that I really loved about the course, and this is what I want to know more about. I want to practice that, and I want to get better at.
No, absolutely. So to learn more about your profession, can you please give us a brief insight about yourself?
Yeah, so I consider myself a filmmaker first and foremost. I started making movies when I was 16, and I then sort of completely self-taught. I didn't go to film school or anything like that. I started shooting my own stuff. I started writing my own stuff. I moved to London when I was young, when I was 19, and I started working at a production company just as a runner, which is the very lowest position you can be. But through that, I sort of started to learn and understand a little bit about the industry, and I also got the opportunity to be a script reader, which is basically where you read all the scripts that are submitted to that production company. You write what they call coverage, which is essentially a sort of a synopsis of the film, what happens in it, the key characters, and then you also write what's good about it, what's bad about it, and should you recommend or not recommend the head of development to take a look at it. So while I was at a sort of a low level, I was actually in quite an important position because I was vetting all these screenplays before the head of development took a look at it. Or sometimes she might read my coverage and go, I don't recommend this movie, but I'm still kind of interested. I'm going to have a look. From there, I sort of then moved back here, and I started sort of continuing to make movies and stuff like that. But that also started my first foray into the digital realm. So this is when I started making YouTube content, web series content, made my first web series, and started sort of experimenting in the online and digital space. This was prior to movies being digital, so this was when we still had DVDs and then later Blu-ray. But that digital space was more strictly for like shorter form content and that type of thing. And so while I was continuing to sort of, my path in filmmaking continued along this direction, the traditional path of filmmaking continued along this direction, I sort of had this other path where a lot of those things, a lot of those skills, a lot of the things that I was creating sort of started moving into the digital space, and having an interest in creating that sort of those web series, that short form content, those types of things. And then they sort of started more coming together a little bit later on, where over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, where, you know, we've seen Netflix, we've seen Amazon Prime, we've seen all these different things that host digital platforms where you can put movies, and also the sort of the marketing around movies and that type of thing has become, well, it's always has been incredibly important, but it's all gone digital. And so because it's all gone digital, you need to weave a lot more of that into your work, and especially for me. So I've made 3 feature films, two sort of narrative feature films and 1 documentary, and then obviously many short films and web series. But those feature films, you know, 2 of those were what you would define as independent feature films. So they were sort of made without sort of funding or resource from the New Zealand Film Commission, and those films are even more reliant on the digital marketing and promotion, and also your own digital marketing and promotion. You don't have a team, you can't go to anyone else to do those things. You need to learn those things yourself, and, you know, there's a lot of talk about grassroots
indie marketing
campaign, and exactly, indie marketing, all that sort of thing, that sort of needs to be learned. So, you know, those 2 things were sort of running parallel, and then they sort of kind of merged as I sort of started looking at the sort of the business of filmmaking and how I could think about sort of getting my film out there, getting as many people to see my films as possible, and sort of understanding how to engage audiences through digital content. And while that's sort of going on in the filmmaking world, I then took a step into teaching digital media, sort of utilizing and sort of taking all of those things that I'd learnt and through filmmaking, through this sort of digital side, the digital content creation, and kind of merging them together as the basis for what I teach. And then I also work as a freelancer, so sort of where I create digital content for other people, whether that be podcasting content, or whether it simply be sort of more conventional video content. But almost everything I make, pretty much everything I make, not almost everything I make, is for digital release. It's for digital platforms. So it's either going on some type of website or web page, or it's going on to some type of social network that whoever my client is has created. And so that's sort of where my journey in a very, very short, brief amount of time, Vinny.
Honestly, there's a lot of moving parts to you.
Yes.
And every time when I'm hearing something that you're going bam, 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 I'm hearing the words like independent, indie, and those words are very important to a filmmaker, because that builds that character from who they are in life, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that I've always been quite passionate about, which is the idea that if you're going to be a filmmaker, that you should understand every aspect of filmmaking. And that means, so like, just I want to direct films or write and direct films, but I need to understand how to operate the camera. I need to understand how to produce. I need to understand how to put a budget together. I then need to understand how to create a trailer for my work. I need to understand what platforms I should put my work on, how to create a page, all those sorts of things. I need to understand every aspect of it. And I think that, you know, that came from sort of earlier in my career, say when I first started making my first feature film, which was in the more conventional way. I didn't know a lot of those things. I only knew how to do it from a sort of very small independent world, but I didn't understand anything about, I guess, the professional side of it. And when I was out of my element like that, it meant that I was reliant on other people. And when you're reliant on other people, that can be a huge barrier to creating, because you need, I need to go to this person to complete that section of the thing before this thing can come out, or this thing can be released, or I can show people this. And all of that is a barrier to creativity. And so what I sort of set out to do back then, when I guess I was found sort of lacking in knowledge, was sort of like, okay, I've really focused on writing and directing for this first sort of 5-10 years here. Now I need to continue that, but really focus on everything else so I understand, because I think for me, you know, what I find my sort of pleasure and joy in creating. And if I'm not creating, that's when I sort of start to get depressed. I feel down. And so what I don't want, I want the least amount of barriers to me being able to create what I think are interesting things and stories that I want to tell. And so having a good amount of digital knowledge, obviously storytelling, filmmaking, that type of thing, they are all things that help reduce those barriers. And the less barriers you have to create, the better. Because I think, again, I was always frustrated by gatekeepers. So gatekeepers are people that tell you can't do, or you can't do that because you don't have this. Yep. Oh, well, we don't think you can do that. Or we don't want to do that thing that you want to do. And in the creative space, the creative arts, there are a lot of gatekeepers. And you can encounter gatekeepers at the beginning of whatever it is, or the end of whatever it is, or somewhere in between. But the more you know, the more knowledge you have, and the more abilities you have, the less reliant you are on those gatekeepers to say, okay, you can do this thing. And so I just never wanted anyone to, I never had to get permission to make my art. And so I certainly, my sort of learnings and the things that I pursued have always been around giving me more freedom to create that sort of thing.
No, absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head, because then when I came up into learning media, because I've always wanted to do journalism and radio hosting, you know, I had to learn from the traditional way of things, and now when we look at traditional media is going backwards, because they need to learn the new way of doing things. That's the digital side of things.
Yes.
And in order for traditional media to survive, that digital aspect has to be acknowledged, because then we're in a new generation where digital things are now the new norm now.
Yeah.
And everything in between, if you don't learn it, then you're left behind in the dust, you know.
Yeah, and that is really good for new creatives, new young creatives. I think that's incredibly positive. Like I said, you want to have the least amount of barriers. And, you know, once upon a time, it was a barrier for me if I just wanted to film something. That was a huge barrier for me, because there was no phone video. There was no really affordable cameras. There was no, you know, oh, well, just, you know, open it up and hit record. That none of that stuff existed. And so, you know, the first big barrier was the equipment. Not being able to afford the equipment, not having the technical skill to use the equipment. And those barriers are being taken away. And that is incredibly positive, because it means that people can get started younger, and they also have more freedom to express themselves. And also, they can do better things. They can do better things that look and sound better, because the technology barrier is not there.
It's not as deep.
Exactly, and that's like incredibly positive. And it means that, you know, because there is also, you know, there's the 10,000 hour rule, which I sometimes talk to my students about, which is that you have to do something for 10,000 hours to get really good at it. And, you know, that's probably something that lots of young people don't want to hear. And it's certainly something that I wouldn't want to hear when I was young and I was starting on hour 1 of that 10,000 or hour 100 of that 10,000, because it meant that maybe what I produced wouldn't be good. But I feel like if you know, the earlier you start, the quicker you're going to get better, and the more that you sort of commit to learning about this sort of stuff and practicing this stuff, the quicker you'll get to that 10,000 hours. And I'm not saying that you won't make great things before then, but then you will be making great things sooner, and that's really positive as well.
No, absolutely. I learned that from not only yourself, but Will behind the camera, is that 10,000 hours is vital. And when I first heard about it, I was going, oh man, that's
so far away.
Far away. But then I've done over 30 plus episodes of podcasting, and I'm looking at it right now and I'm going, man, that 10,000 hours sure doesn't look as far than what it was before.
Absolutely.
Because that hard work and dedication towards it just makes you want to strive for those 10,000 hours. Do something that you want to love for. And I like to, again, personally, I like to thank you for that, because that insight helps me to not only look forward, but look around me going, okay, I can be able to jump at this spot. It's not just as linear as it was when I first saw it from my lens.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to say everyone has to do 10,000 hours to be good. That's not necessarily the case, but just to think that if that is what you're working towards, know that you probably will be good by then. There won't be any question about it anymore. And so, that's what you can take. And also just that, like, although technology has made everything very quick and made everything very easy and efficient, it hasn't changed the fact that you need to invest a significant amount of time into any sort of digital media or any type of thing that you're creating for it to be good. And so, while yes, you can do these things quicker and these things are easier, that investment of time will still remain the same. If you want to get to that point where you're sort of on a professional level.
No, absolutely. Let's start it back. Let's go back to 16-year-old Guy Pigden. What inspired you to get into filmmaking? What was that genuine spark that made you want to pick up a camera, that made you want to write a script?
I think for me, it was a lot of things, but it was really the way that I was brought up. And so I was brought up with my dad was a big fan of movies. But he wasn't just a big fan of movies, he was a big fan of the making of movies. So where a lot of my friends would just talk about a movie, he would talk about the movie and who directed it and who started it. And he would also be interested in like the behind the scenes of that, how it was made. And so that was a big factor, because that was one way that I really connected with my dad, was through love of movies and his sort of introducing me to a lot of things, say, for example, Clint Eastwood and like the spaghetti Western films. Like that was something that wasn't actually what you would normally suggest would be something that you watch if you're going to watch a Clint Eastwood film. You'd watch, whatever he was making at the time. But here my dad was going, well, check, this is how he started. And this is through this director, Sergio Leone, and this was how he sort of got his break, and he was making these anti-Westerns, which were all filmed in Italy. That was sort of fascinating to me. So I think that was a huge aspect of it, is sort of my dad's sort of encouragement and sort of what he was interested in. And that was because I didn't always get on with my dad. In fact, I didn't get on with my dad a lot, but that was something that I could sort of engage and connect with him on. I do think that Star Wars played a huge part in sort of inspiring me, because that was the first, or sort of one of the first films that just really blew my mind. The story, the characters, the three movies, the world, the level of imagination involved. We may look at those old Star Wars movies now as like par for the course in terms of what you see now with Marvel films and all that sort of thing. But back then there wasn't movies like that. Yeah. And so for there to be this kind of movie going, hey, I've just imagined this completely different world, this completely new space with these sort of archetype characters, that was really interesting to me. And then I think the final thing was just that my parents really did encourage creativity. I did a lot of art. When I was a kid, I used to love drawing. Like, I used to draw sort of almost every day, and they would sort of promote and encourage that. And obviously, maybe again, no coincidence, my dad was also a very keen artist. And so I think all those things combined with my love of books. So it's like you have books, you have drawing and art, visual, and then you have those movies, and then you sort of put them all in a blender. Obviously, you're going to come out with someone who is really engaged and excited to tell stories like the ones that I experienced and inspired me. So I think that sort of upbringing was really what got me hooked on that idea.
And you expect you explain about the creative aspect of things, and it carries you onward. I think of my upbringing. I wasn't influenced by my father or my mother. I was influenced by myself, where I would. Like I said, I was into journalism. I would watch the news and I would go, these people are doing like important pieces on certain events. And I was like, what else could I do with that? Then I read newspapers. So to listen to you going, okay, I read books and all that stuff helps me go, okay, yeah, I did the same thing. I watched the news, I listened to radio, read the newspaper. With all of that knowledge behind you, how did you get your first gig into media in general?
Well, I mean, it goes in a few different stages, so just bear with me, Vinny. But I think that my first sort of little break was becoming the runner over in London. And that was actually through my uncle, who was not in the film industry, but was just friends with a few different people and a few different contacts. And basically, he reached out to one of those people and said, hey, my nephew's just come over from New Zealand. He's really keen to get into the filmmaking. Is there anything that you might have? And it's like, well, maybe we have this runner position, so let me have a chat with him and see. And so I met up with this guy who then put me in touch, and sort of through a series of emails ended up getting this work as a runner. And that definitely sort of first opened my eyes to the kind of the professional side of the film world, not just me making movies and me mucking about with my friends. And to be honest, filmmaking should be that. It should be you mucking about with your friends and having fun and doing that. That's something that I've tried not to ever lose in terms of filmmaking. But from there, I guess my sort of next little break was that I attended a script writing or producing sort of networking event in Dunedin. This is when, after London, I moved back to Dunedin, which again, there's no real film industry down there. And I met a few people there, but one of the people that I met was a Auckland producer. And again, talking about sort of, we had an interesting discussion. I sort of talked about my aspirations. And at that stage, I thought, well, what am I really good at? I haven't done my 10,000 hours of directing, so I'm not really good at directing. But I have done certainly close to 10,000 hours of writing. I've written a bunch of scripts. I wrote a bunch of scripts when I was over in London. I've been writing since a very young age. That was something, again, one of those things that I was really into. And I was like, I think of all my skills, I'm probably the best at writing right now. Like, I want to be a director, but who's going to take me seriously as a director? I've just made these short films and they're not very good. I can admit that they're probably not very good. But I think my writing, because I've just been reading all these scripts and I've been saying whether they're good or not. And in reading those scripts, I've decided, that I can probably write to the standard of the scripts that I'm recommending. And that's what I'm trying to do with my own screenplays. So I had this meeting, I submitted a few writing samples to this producer, and they were like, oh, this is quite interesting. Would you like to meet up? And I said, yes, I would. And so, but they lived in Auckland. So I flew myself up to Auckland. I stayed with a friend of mine, just slept on their couch. And that was me being as proactive as I possibly could. It's like, okay, this is an opportunity. This is just, the door is just a little crack open here. And I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. It probably won't, but let me just try if I can give it a little nudge and do everything I can to give it a little nudge. And so I went up there, I had that meeting, we talked about various things, and then what essentially came up is that they wanted to do a script set in the South Island, which is where I was from, which is probably why they wanted to talk to me, and they wanted to do it essentially about like a comedy, but it was like I think it was going to be called Man and Dog, and it was basically about a farmer whose sheepdog got depressed. And I sort of thought that was actually quite a cool concept, and then he essentially goes up to the big city to try and sort of cure the dog's depression, and then is sort of introduced to this culture shock of, big city living. And, that was where all the sort of comedy would come from. And so we sort of started developing that idea, and I wrote them a few different synopsis and treatments. They then took that, with a little bit of rewriting, they then took that to the film commission. They actually secured funding to write the script, and so then they paid me to write that script. And so I was sort of developing that in conjunction with, I had written and shot my own sort of pilot for a TV series, and that had got interest from another producer, and that had been optioned. And so I was sort of writing the script over here, and then I was also developing this pilot episode of a TV series, which was going to be starring myself and my producing partner, Harley. And so I'd written these two opportunities for myself. And so those were my sort of two, like, kind of initial breaks in the industry, was getting the opportunity to write that script, which did not get produced, it did not get made, but just to be a paid writer was a really big deal to me. Like, to say officially, look, I'm a professional writer. Someone is paying me to write the screenplay, and they actually flew me up to Auckland this time. I didn't have to pay, and I sort of worked and collaborated with them writing. And so, that was one thing, and then that other one was this kind of pilot episode that I was developing with another producer here in Auckland, and but developing that as a sort of a comedy series, which I was going to star in as well. And again, that did not go anywhere. Ultimately, we shot that pilot, but it was not picked up, and there's probably a few reasons for that, but those were my sort of two initial breaks. And then that sort of led to my relationship with a producer in Dunedin, which led to submitting essentially for what at the time was called the Escalator Initiative. The idea being that you give $250,000 to these first-time directors to make their first feature film. So most films are made for $1 million+, so $250,000 is essentially, a quarter of the budget, or less than a quarter of the budget that you might get. And this initiative required you to write an entire feature film script, develop a budget, a production plan, all the stuff around it, and essentially do it, I don't know, let's just say, but like 50% of the pre-production before you even knew if you're going to get to do it. And again, talking about being proactive, I sort of said, okay, let me write that script, but let me do like 5 drafts before it gets to them. That's how proactive. I'm not just going to write something and submit it to them. It's like, we're going to write this draft now. We've got, a couple of months to the deadline, and then I'm going to rewrite it a bunch of times. So when they get to reading it, it's going to be the best script they've ever seen. And so we had a very, very, like, our submission was the most that I heard. Our submission was the most detailed in terms of character breakdowns, in terms of how polished the script was, in terms of like the methodologies we'd created for how we were going to make the film for that amount of money. And we fortunately were then given the money to make that. So that was my first, that was the first sort of thing where I'd got secured funding for as a writer and director. And then and then everything just progressed from there.
I want to go back to that 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
I've seen more than just 10,000 hours.
Yeah, probably in what I've just said to you, for sure.
No, absolutely, and it's amazing because I can just picture you and your struggles because when I always love saying, when you're in the trenches, you're just working as hard as you can to pump out as much as you can.
Yep.
And I love the fact that you went, okay, we're not screwing around. We're gonna write a draft now. Take that 5 draft, and I'm gonna take that draft and work 5 out from it until we get that absolute one that's ready to go out there. And you got that funding. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that if you get given or if I was given a sniff of an opportunity somewhere, I would try and work as hard as I possibly could to make the most of that, whatever it is. So even, when we got that pilot episode, it's like, we wrote the script, but it's like, okay, but if we want to act in it, no one's going to buy that. No one's going to believe us. So we need to shoot our own demo pilot and show that we can act in it and show that we are funny and show that they should center this, this TV series around us. So I didn't just write that script. I wrote that script. We shot that pilot ourselves. I edited it together. And so when I delivered it to people, I wasn't like, hey, here's the script. What do you think about it? It was like, hey, here's the script and a first demo episode. So that we're really serious about this, but we have a vision for this and you should trust us to do it. Yeah.
But it doesn't leave the person who's like, okay, I don't have to envision what the vision looks like. I have a physical copy of what this vision looks like, and you're already proactively showing me it. Perfect.
Exactly.
I would rather rely on someone who has that proactivity instead of someone who's just giving it just a script. Because then I have to vision everything. You know what I mean?
And also, I guess when you're in this sort of creative space in any area, you're going to hear a lot of no's.
Yeah.
You can hear no's all the time. And you've got to get used to hearing no's. But you also, whenever you do something, whether you create something, you want to, whoever you're working with or whoever you want to work with, you want to give them the least amount of opportunities to say no. And so that was always my sort of mindset, is like, from all of these different types of things that I was developing, it's like, let me give them the least amount of opportunities to say no.
No, absolutely. Let's fast forward a little bit. Let's go in advance. You did an amazing job explaining, from your introduction. Let's go. I would like to think about your movie that you got nominated.
Are we talking about Older? Is that what we're talking about?
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my second feature film was Older, which was made completely independently and took actually, again, talking about 10,000 hours, it took 7 years to finish. From the time I started in 2013, I finished it in 2020. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, but, primarily, without the traditional resources and financing, you have to be very creative with the way that you make something, and you also have to make it in your own time, as opposed, you can't go, hey guys, look, I can't pay the rent for the next year because I'm going to be editing this and I don't have any money. Sorry, So, you have to keep working. You have to keep things going. All those bills need to be paid. And so you have only these small pockets of time. And actually making a feature film requires an immense amount of time and a full-time capacity to really, to do in a short amount of time. I don't have that short amount of time, so it became a long amount of time. But, that film was, again, all about marrying the digital and the sort of traditional and learning all about that. And, the film has I think done very, very well. It's available on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, and then a bunch of other streaming platforms, but those being the two biggest. And we've had it streamed over 1 million times worldwide, which is cool if you visualize 1 million people anywhere. And so, but within that, like the film, I've gotten some really nice feedback just from people reaching out to me online. Again, that online connection and how important that is. But we were also nominated, or I was nominated for the Septimius Awards, which is this sort of awards festival in Amsterdam, which acknowledges filmmakers from around the world. And I was nominated as Best Actor in an Oceanian film for my portrayal of Alex in Older, because I did star in Older. So we talk about, this pilot episode that didn't go anywhere, which I starred in. Now we're, cut to, 10, 15 years later, this movie that I starred in, we went over to Amsterdam and I won the award for Best Actor. And, that was very cool, very special time.
Absolutely. And then that's the main reason why I ask about Older, is because that if you look, like from a viewer standpoint who's watching this podcast, it's a huge jump, because then now your movie's on like Amazon Video and Tubi. How does it feel to know that Amazon Video is is showing something that you created? It's something that not many people can say that.
Yeah, I honestly, I think of it more as in practical terms. So, the question was, how is this film going to be distributed? How do we get onto a platform like that? What's the steps? And how can my film take those steps to get to that point? And so I guess I don't really think about it like, oh, it's on Amazon, that's awesome. I guess I'm more like, well, thank God I got onto Amazon, so it has a platform for everyone to, that I can refer other people to. But, part of going back to learning, like what I learned on my first feature film. So my first feature film is also available, or was available on Amazon. It was also showed for many years in the US on Showtime. It was available almost everywhere. And I didn't see $1 of that money, and essentially we got ripped off on that film. And so my question wasn't so much like, how can I get onto these things? It was sort of like, how can I not get ripped off, and how can I learn lessons from that first film and not make those same mistakes? And part of that is going back to that idea of gatekeepers and, who you work with, is like sort of, having another understanding of that world, the selling of the film, the distribution of the film, the online costs involved, having an understanding of all of that from learning over the first film. Okay, this is what to look out for. This is a bad deal, that we should avoid. All these sorts of loopholes that people try and create to take advantage of you. Don't be taken advantage of. Learn and then give yourself your own autonomy to get the film out in a different way, and not have that same experience.
Yeah, and it goes back to, always going back to this conversation we had. It's always always being prepared for those no's. It's always being prepared for those lessons. That magic word, 10,000 hours. You're learning while you're doing things at the same time.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that, like learning while doing, or doing while learning, or whatever you want to put it. But everything that I've learned in my career really has been self-taught to some degree. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't have mentors or people that steered me in the right direction along the way, but a lot of the times I didn't. A lot of the times I was sort of like, man, I'd love to have a mentor right now. I'd love some advice about this. I'd love some experienced person to come in and help me, but I don't have that. So I guess I just have to learn it. I'll just have to figure it out myself. And, I think mentors are great, and I encourage anyone to, if you've got mentors in the space that you want to work in, reach out to them and, utilize their knowledge, because actually, you could learn a lot quicker that way. But being also prepared to learn that stuff yourself, and sort of make the most of it. So, I had to teach myself. So part of that 10,000 hours you can reduce if you have a mentor that can help you along the way. Maybe you could make it 5,000 hours. But yeah.
No. I am very blessed because I have 2 mentors. So basically I have to do 0 hours, what I feel.
That's right, but then you just got to cash in those ships.
Oh yeah, and then give my my royalties out to those who are my mentors. But speaking of mentors, and we're coming towards like where we are currently. So you were my tutor for MIT, and I was just wondering, for those who are in square one, what advice could you give to those who are, again, me, who are in square one, who are wanting to get into that digital media field?
Yeah,
because like all other like professions, and I've been in IT. I am in IT currently, and it's like a minefield out there because you never know what you're going to step on. It might go boom. So without getting the boom part of it, what would you advise someone who's getting into that field, and how could they prepare themselves?
Well, I think the best preparation is, two things. You got to have a thick skin. You really do. I've had way more rejections in my career than I've had triumphs or successes. And I mean the scale is not even comparable, right? And, like I said, you're going to have to get used to hearing no. And you can't let that phase you. And that's the most important thing is, don't get me wrong, it's going to hurt your feelings every time you hear a no. It doesn't matter. Today, it's going to hurt my feelings just like it did 20 years ago. But you just have to kind of keep going. And so it's building that mental toughness and resiliency to be prepared to keep going in spite of no's, to look for ways when it seems like there is no way, and to teach yourself to remove those barriers and gatekeepers. So, being very open to sort of feedback from other people is also really helpful. That's something that I wasn't at the beginning of my career. I didn't want to hear people tell me what was wrong with my stuff. I just wanted them to tell me how great my stuff was. But that doesn't facilitate any learning or growth. That just facilitates backpacking while not understanding what I'm doing wrong. And so, again, although it can hurt your feelings, you have to be open to criticism and you have to actually embrace it. You have to go, okay, so what was wrong with it? What didn't you like about it? What could I try and improve for next time? But certainly those are sort of the things that I'd say. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Be prepared for that and be prepared to keep going when it's tough. And also, like I said, now we have the tools on YouTube. So if there's things that you go, hey, I want to learn how to podcast. Well, if you don't have a mentor that can help you, then I would go online and I would literally type into Google how to podcast, or onto YouTube. YouTube is a great learning platform now for us. How to do X, whatever it is that you want to do. And don't leave it at one video, watch 50 of them. And then take the best bits from those 50, But of course, if you can find someone in the real life, in the real space that can maybe assist you, absolutely maximize and utilize that time and those people, because rather than searching through 50 videos, they can probably just go, this is the thing you need to work on, or you did that wrong, or well, maybe if you just adjust this, and you can save a bit more time. But we don't all have that, and certainly, like I said, I didn't always have that, and so you just got to be prepared to keep going. No, so I hope that is decent advice.
No, it's you say it's decent advice. I honestly, even though it was half a year, it's still advice that you gave me like a year ago. And I'll take it to heart, because every time when someone is willing to sit with me, you know how hard it is to get someone to sit with you to do learning?
Yeah.
It's difficult at this age. No one has the time to sit down and do this sort of talks.
Yeah.
It's always fast paced, and that's hence the reason why we have that saying, it's always a fast paced world if you're in that. So thank you again. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Vinny. And maybe I'll say one more thing to that, is that when you're looking for feedback and you're thinking about self-improvement, is like, this is something that I do to this day, but I've sort of done it really from, at least sort of 15 years ago, where I always ask myself that same question. So if you can't ask someone else what's wrong with it, ask yourself what's wrong with it. The focus should always be to just get a tiny bit better each hit out. So each hit out at this podcast, you just got a tiny bit better than you did last time, whether it's the questions you ask, your preparation, the way that you speak, whatever it is, the way that you edit it together, whatever that case is, you should be just looking at those 1% increases. Even if it's not 1%, it's like 0.1%. Because if you do that every time, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that you want to do, you will definitely just consistently improve. And even the work that we do now, the work I do with Will at Campfire Studios, all that sort of thing, we have an awesome professional setup for anyone that might want a podcast space, video content, digital content. But I'm still asking myself that question. What did I do well, but what did I do wrong, and how can I make that a little bit better for next time? And if you keep that in the back of your head, you're going to just improve by leaps and bounds really quickly.
No, absolutely. I'm keeping that in my heart at the moment. So that's mine.
It's good, Vinny.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna start wrapping things up. So I normally end up with a quote, but I do have something special to ask you. But
okay,
first and foremost, what is your favorite quote that you want to share with our viewers that are out there?
There's a few quotes that I like. There's the old Winston Churchill one, which I've told you before, Vinny. Yeah. When you're going through hell, keep going. That's one of my favorites. Another one I like is, when you lose, don't lose the lesson.
Nice.
I think there's probably a few more, but those two I think are pretty good.
Nice. And finally, this is a special shout out, because by next week your class officially graduates.
That's right, they do, yes.
So what message do you want to give to your class I know I'm going to be sharing this out to them to have a watch? Because they've been messaging me, by the way, going, "How's Guy? How is he?" And I can give them, he's fine, he's busy all the time.
Sitting at home in his pajamas.
Oh, exactly. No, you always had it work.
Yeah. Well, look, what I would say to my class of 2022 is, congratulations, team. Super proud of everyone's hard work and what everyone put in to pass and graduate. And I'm super excited to see what you guys do in the future, because I think that all of you have incredible potential to do amazing stuff in a variety of different digital mediums. And I think that I just want to say once again that you made that class for me inspiring and a real pleasure to come to every day, which, I can't always say, but I was so impressed by everyone's teamwork and camaraderie that it was just I was excited every day to come in and go, cool, let's drop this little bit of knowledge on them and see what they do with it. And so I hope that you have all been continuing down your paths to continue to create digital content. And if I don't see you at graduation, congratulations. And if I do see you at graduation, I'll see you then.
Hey Guy, this is Johnny McMaster from your class of 2022. I'd just like to say thank you for everything you've taught me. I have put into play. Some may say I haven't, but I have. I appreciate everything you've done for me, and thank you for giving me the skill set that you have. I just wish you all the best for the future. Keep in contact with them. Hopefully you can keep in contact with your class. Thank you for just being our teacher and dealing with all our little tantrums we had in class. Just thank you for just being there for us and giving us the guidance that we needed to finally graduate your class of 2022. All the best for the future.
Let's get this circus. Wait. What's a good terminology?
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Let's get the show on the road. That's it. Let's get the show on the road. As much as would have been fun for you to be here, I understand you couldn't. But I just want to say thank you for last year. My time in your course, it was short, but if I'm honest, it was the most fun I ever had when it comes to learning. I was a headache, especially when it came to me never being on time. I still have an issue. I'm working on it. But yeah, you were pretty much the coolest teacher I ever had. It was fun learning from you. Some of the skills I have from the course of you, I still have it. I'm still practicing with them. They're all a big help right now in UV, especially with Photoshop, and upcoming soon with Premiere Pro with the green screen. That was a big. It's going to be a big help, and I'm really thankful for all you've done. And yeah, just overall a big thank you for being one of the best teachers. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Just got back from the gym and had a shower. It's Friday, and I'd like to say thank you to Guy. Sorry for this late response, Vinny. I've just been busy. Trying to find time. But anyway, thank you, Guy. It was an awesome experience to do the course with everyone. It was awesome to catch up with everyone as well. I know everyone is going to continue on moving forward. I know Vinny's taking a break from his computer studies at the moment, which is he's going to focus more on his podcast, which is great to hear. Vessi is continuing on doing computer studying, moving towards, I think it's the IT side of it. Johnny's looking good. Yeah, he's focusing more on his health side as well. And yeah, for me, I've got some good news. I've got the go-ahead for my bariatric surgery, Guy. So next 8 weeks, I get to go to the super clinic and go through the process of getting my stomach shrunk, cut down to 90%, and having 10% left, so I can only have small portions of food, which is great. I've been waiting for the surgery for a while. I don't have 25 grand in the bank, so that's good. And I'll get to pay for also for the loose skin when I lose all that weight, which is another 25 grand. And I hear it's congratulations for you too, Guy, that you got your new business going. Vinny informed us all about it. But yeah, I'd like to say I'll take the time out to say thank you again, Guy. I really enjoyed doing the course, learned a lot from you, and I'm going to continue on studying probably next year. Once I've had all this surgery again, then I can focus more on my studies. But yeah, and also thank you, Vinny. Vinny's like my little brother that I never had before. Yeah. So yeah, cheers.
So, from our gratitude from our heart, please accept this gift from all of us. It's a little greenstone in here.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Vinny. That is very special. That's amazing. And what a great memory. Really appreciate that.
No, absolutely. We want to, when we have these talks, we always think about you, because you not only gave us knowledge, you gave us character. You know, you gave us the individuality. You know, we grew up within that 6 months. You saw us as fresh green students who, you know, you were willing to wait for us to grow, and we grew up to trees. Now we're getting to that point that, hell, we're going to be out there in the big world because of the knowledge that we know more and we know better now.
Well, thank you, Vinny, and thank you to all the students. I'm really going to cherish this. And Vinny, you almost got me to cry, but you didn't. So can't see the students see me tear up, Vinny. But thank you very much.
No, absolutely. Once again, thank you so much, man. And thank you once again for sharing this special moment. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and as I enjoyed this amazing human. Kia ora.